One of the most powerful things, especially when you are working on unearthing some sort of root cause or barrier, I think one of the most powerful things that you can do is identify what's going on beneath the surface. And one of the most effective tools that I've found to do this is an adaptation of Juan Eicholz's discourse frameworks. And so Dr. Cherie Bridges-Patrick and I have published this revised version, and I think it's really helpful, especially when we're talking about racial discourse and dialogue about race in schools and districts. And naming kind of what we haven't named is challenging, right? Naming the unnameable. Often we talk about in adaptive challenges and adaptive leadership work. This kind of helps you have a framework to position yourselves in your communities. I think different teams have different kind of communities and different discourses that are present. It's not one or the other. But having this framework enables you to kind of share with your staff, I want you to determine where you are as this team or as this team or as a whole community. Where do we fall in our discourses? Are we hitting the mark in the generative mobilizing discourse capacity, or are we falling short? And in which ways are we doing that? So let's get to it. Let's look at where you are and where your teams that you're part of are, and then where we go from there. So here are our 4 quadrants. Again, this is from Dr. Cherie Bridges-Patrick and myself, adapted from Juan Eicholz's work. When we think of adaptive capacity and adaptive leadership, we have come up with or adapted these 4 quadrants. Now in pink, we have generative mobilizing discourse. This is where we want to be. This is where there's imagination and possibilities and disequilibrium, which is required for advancing, right? Changing, evolving. What I love about this is that this is the piece that not just invites racial justice, but does it through the engagement of emotion. And this is critical. We talk a lot about SEL and how this is really important for young people. It is important for us as adults as well. It is important for us as multi-age teams of youth and adults in partnership with one another. And it is this work that is going to be the difference between academically talking about something and actually failing as an initiative and actually doing the work in a sustainable, transformative way. So that's where we want to be. Often we are not in that quadrant, right? We are finding ourselves in others, and you can be in multiple depending on the space that you're in, the day, right? You can have a team that highly functions in generative mobilizing discourse a lot of times and then falls into one of the others in other times. Let's go through what some of those others are. One, let's start in this top third here. So I think it's quadrant 2. And my math teacher from high school will be really mad at me for not knowing that firmly. But I think this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go in that order. So we started with where we want to be. Now let's go to this one. This is polarizing discourse. And so what that means is, yes, we have the disequilibrium, which is necessary, but we don't have that imagination and possibility that is on the rightmost axis. We have a reinforcement of past patterns. So this is often what we see in the United States, particularly in the past several years. Our political discourse has been very entrenched, right? We have seen a polarization. You are with us or you are against us, right? So this idea that I am right, you are wrong, I will not move, I will not hear you out, I will not engage in empathetic conversation, I will not engage in inviting imagination and possibilities. I am entrenched in my position and I am defensive. That's going to reinforce the defensiveness in others, and it's going to keep us polarized. So that is polarizing discourse. If you see your team doing that, right, what we are missing there is that imagination and possibility. Let's now look at the next quadrant, silencing and denying. Not only are we reinforcing past patterns here because we're just avoiding conversations altogether, we are silencing people who bring them up. We are denying any responsibility. We are moving the responsibility externally. I see this a lot in root cause analysis conversations or conversations when we're strategic planning as a district, and we externalize the problem. And so we say, oh, that's not us. That's not as a school. That's not something we can handle or we can address. That's a problem with this thing, right? So it might be families, or it might be, the political climate, whatever. We are externalizing the responsibility, and we are denying any of our own responsibility or engagement with this. So this avoidance, someone brings up racial justice and we avoid it. We change the conversation. We perhaps make a joke to deviate the conversation or bring levity to the conversation in a way that doesn't move us forward to that conversation, but actually turns us around and invites us to retract or shy away from the conversation. Now, in that one, we are not only reinforcing past patterns, we are also, as I said, ignoring that opportunity for imagination and possibilities, but we're staying very comfortable in our equilibrium. Now, this last piece is intellectualing discourse. This is very popular among the demographic of, liberal white folks who often are in teaching spaces. So intellectualizing discourse, and this is something that does not come from research, that's just my own thought on intellectualizing discourse. From what I have seen as a liberal white educator myself, this is where I see this happening a lot of times. It doesn't mean it just happens there. This is anecdotal from my perspective, but I know I tend to do this. We're very didactic, we're intellectual, we're in our heads, but not our hearts. So we invite those imagination and possibilities. We say, this is what it could look like, and here's what we're going to do, and step 1, step 2, step 3, right? A lot of my videos are about that. But if we are not engaging emotion, if we are not enabling ourselves to experience disequilibrium, step out of the comfort zone, be wrong, recognize harm that we may have caused, whatever it is that is going to be unsettling for us, we don't get here. We maintain equilibrium, whether we want to academically or not, because we've intellectualized, because we've avoided the emotion. We don't truly get to that disequilibrium, and so we don't move forward, and so we're not actually engaging in generative mobilizing discourse. So these are our 4 quadrants. So excited to hear which one or ones you find yourself or your team's in. If you want to comment below, I think that would be super helpful just to collect a little bit more data, since this is a pretty new representation of what racial discourse and discourses might look like in districts. Let me know. If you have questions, let me know. And I think I might do another video on what to do if you are in one of those blue boxes and you're not quite out generative mobilizing discourse. So look forward to that.